My name's Justin Carter. I'm a barrister practicing principally in Queensland at Gerard Brennan Chambers, but I also maintain a list presence in Victoria with Svensson Barristers. As a barrister, the principal focus of the work is to provide advocacy services to solicitors and lay clients, as well as expert advisory services on contentious issues that are in train for litigation or on general compliance and transactional matters. In addition to my private practice at the bar, I also have for many years now done a number of publishing enterprises with both LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters in particular. For the most part, that's been law reporting. The law reports are the official records of the important judgments of significant courts in Australia, but especially in Queensland. I'm currently one of the sub-editors of the Queensland reports, which are the authenticated and authorised reports of the Supreme Court of Queensland. But I also act as a law reporter for several LexisNexis publications, including the Australian Law Reports, the Australian Law Decisions Reports, the Intellectual Property Reports, and the Butterworth Property Reports. I also do a number of New Zealand reports within that in various subject areas. The reporting jobs are very interesting because they involve very much refining and developing a skill of reading and analysing a judgment, because the best way to know if you've understood an area of law or understood a particular judgment is to be able to explain that in its most essential terms to a client, a solicitor, but importantly, a judge who's going to be making the decisions at issue in the case. And through my work as a law reporter, I've been able to really hone that skill, because the whole point of the law reporting exercise is to emphasize to legal practitioners why any particular judgment is significant and what the important parts of that judgment are. The idea of a typical day for a barrister, I'll say for the ordinary course of barrister, is to get up, go to chambers, check your emails, maybe prepare for court that day. Court normally starts at 9:30 if you're in a lower court, or just after 10 a.m. if you're in a more superior court. And you'll go and you'll, if you're there for an application, you'll sometimes attend a call over where the judge presiding will call over all the matters that are going to be heard that day and put them in an order in which they'll come on to be heard at the court. And so you'll get your place in the queue. Otherwise, if you're there for a trial, you'll ordinarily be the only matter on. And so you'll go to court, meet with your client, meet with the solicitor, and you'll get ready to go in and argue the case for that day. But not every day is a day in court, and my practice is largely an advisory practice. So even though I do that sometimes, most of the time it's a lot of paperwork. So it's a lot of reading the law and researching what the applicable law is, and it's also a lot of writing. So analysing what proofs of evidence or affidavits have been prepared by the solicitors, what documentary evidence is available in the form of contracts or emails or other relevant forms of evidence that you'll be considering, and then writing advices explaining, is the thing we want to do legal? Is it illegal? What are the consequences what are the consequences if they are illegal? But then also, we're getting sued by this company. What do we do? Are they right? Are we right? What is the best forensic course of action going forward? And so those are the kinds of questions that you really spend a lot of your time out of court focused on. What I like most about my role is the intellectual stimulation and the flexibility of the role. And they don't necessarily go hand in hand, but sometimes they do. I think that the flexibility of the role, it comes from the fact that it's a necessary requirement of being a barrister that you carry on business as a sole trader. So you're not allowed to join in partnership like solicitors do, and you're not allowed to incorporate a company. You have to trade as an individual. And there are important policy reasons for that. Number one, among them, is that you need to be strictly independent from everybody else that you come into contact with, because you need to be able to argue your client's case without any allegiance to an employer or to another lawyer. And so the upshot of that is that as a sole trader, you're your own boss. And so you're not answerable to anyone in the sense that you get to manage how your own business carries on, but you are answerable in the sense that you have clients and a marketplace to which you have to answer to. So the work still has to get done. In terms of the flexibility aspect, what I enjoy is in terms of the intellectual stimulation aspect, what I enjoy is that I've managed to situate myself at the bar in such a way that interesting matters are the regular fix of my trade. And so if there's a complex matter that involves foreign law, that's often the kind of case in which I'll be briefed. I spent a number of years in the South Pacific, involved in a mining dispute there. I've had a number of Chinese clients from the Republic of China and the People's Republic, as well as Hong Kong and Singapore. And so you're often exposed to very interesting other places and legal systems that when I was in law school, I never thought I'd be doing. And being at the other end of the spectrum, as it were, from solicitors, where by the time a barrister is briefed in a matter, most of the significant areas of dispute in a case have really come to the fore, and the parties really know what they're fighting about. And so the barrister's job is to really tackle with those pointy issues, and that's what I find interesting. I think the key skills required for being a barrister, and even for working in legal publishing, are one, an ability and an enjoyment of reading. There's a lot of reading. You can't escape how much reading there is. And just when you think you've finished all the reading, there's more reading. So you've got to like that. The other key skill is writing. And it's writing in a particular way. When I started at the bar and when I started as a lawyer, I had a very prosaic and flowery mode of composition. So I would write in very long and elaborate sentences. And the unfortunate thing is, it's not a creative writing course. And so when you're a lawyer and when everyone's very busy and trying to get to the point, your writing needs to get to the point. And so developing the skill to write cleanly, in an abridged way, and in a way that effectively communicates your point is absolutely necessary. And I think the third skill is confidence. And it's something that I think a lot of lawyers struggle with. It's certainly something that I still struggle with now and then. But it's something that you really need to not only have, but be able to convey even when you don't have it. Because, especially as a barrister, both in terms of your opinions that you deliver will be scrutinized by lawyers, by clients, by the court. And certainly when you're making arguments to the court, the entire point of the exercise is that, for the most part, people aren't necessarily going to agree with you just because you say it. And so you really need to know how to make a point, advance an argument, and deal with the criticism that comes with that process. I think one of the most challenging aspects of being a barrister is, because you are carrying on business as a sole trader and because you are an individual, is managing the competing demands of everyone else around you. Because even though you're your own boss, at the end of the day, you're answerable to your solicitor, you're answerable to the demands of their client, which is the company or the individual who's seeking the services of a lawyer. You're answerable to a court that's imposed a timetable for the doing of certain things. And you're not only doing one case at any given time, you might be doing 10 or 20 at any given point. And not only are you doing your things in relation to that matter, but everyone else is doing their things and playing their part in the process. And so managing your work in a matter, managing the stage at which that matter is at, and ensuring that the trains are running on time across all the matters that you're involved in, I think is one of the greatest and most challenging aspects of the role. When I studied law at Griffith, I did it in conjunction with a Bachelor of International Business degree, majoring in international relations, and I also completed a Bachelor of Business Studies degree in management through Monash University. And so I'd come out of law school with 3 degrees, each sort of a backup of the other in case a career in one discipline didn't work out. despite that, after a brief stint of teaching at Griffith, I managed to secure an associateship with Justice Bell and Justice Barry at the Family Court. From then, I went to work as a research associate at the Federal Court before working as an associate to Justice Keane, who is now on the High Court, but who at the time was a judge of the Court of Appeal of Queensland. Following that, and having seen the best and the worst that Queensland has to offer in all the court roles, I thought, well, I can at least give it a try. And having that exposure to the courtroom and to the process and to counsel, and knowing a bit more about their role, I took the plunge and thereafter went into a career at the bar. And I've been doing it now for almost 8 years. When I graduated with 3 bachelor's degrees and no relevant work experience, I obviously had the choice between the 3 of them, which I would pursue most diligently to see which would pay off. And I started with law, and it was interesting because it wasn't necessarily my first choice. When I went to university, I really wanted to be a diplomat. I really wanted to go to the Foreign Service and work in international politics. And if not that, then it was going to be, oh, I really want to work in international law, in public international law, so treaties between nations and the relationships between governments, rather than private international law, which is what I actually focus on now, which is private disputes between citizens of different countries. But the interesting thing that ultimately kept me coming back to law was that there was this prospect for constant and never-ending intellectual engagement. And I think that that kind of stimulation and the promise of that being ongoing and ever-changing was what ultimately pushed me over the edge. I have a Bachelor of Laws degrees with first-class honours from Griffith University, a Bachelor of International Business, majoring in International Relations from Griffith as well, and a Bachelor of Business Studies, majoring in Management from Monash University. I also completed my practical legal training, graduate diploma with the College of Law here in Brisbane, and I have a Master of Laws degrees majoring in Chinese business law from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, at which I attended as a global scholar. When I graduated from law school here at Griffith, it was a difficult first year or so. I had graduated at the top of my degree with University Medal and first class honours, and I thought that meant I would automatically get a job, and it didn't happen. And I ended up working at the Supreme Court Library in the capacity of a research officer to help them design a new technological service that was at the time very innovative. That position lasted about 6 months in a contract role, and then I returned to Griffith for a semester of casual tutoring. All this by way of interesting forays into jobs touching on the law, but not quite yet being a lawyer. And if only because during this whole period, I interviewed extensively with judges for associate roles and for law firms up and down the East Coast for graduate law clerk positions. And despite a number of interviews, I simply wasn't successful. I can't probably put it at too high a figure, but I think I probably interviewed in about 50 different places. I certainly sent out well over 100, if not more, copies of my resume to people. And then eventually, towards the end of the first semester in which I was teaching at Griffith, I was put in touch with one of the judges at the family court by a mutual acquaintance. And it was through that process that I was interviewed and got my first sort of quote-unquote real legal job as an associate at the family court. And it became apparent to me that the factor that put me over the top, as it were, in terms of getting that job was the work I'd done at the Supreme Court Library. It didn't seem like something that was connected to where I wanted to go in the end, but I took the opportunity when it came up, and through that I met a very lovely and distinguished retired judge who was impressed with the work I did and was able to act as a referee when it came to applying for the role at the family court. And so I think what I learned from those early career steps was there's no one right way to get to the career you want or the career you think you want. And more importantly, you never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to impress, and what kind of relationships you'll build through unexpected turns as your career gets started. In terms of what I'd like to know about the legal profession when I was first starting at uni, I think it would have been really good to know how much emphasis and how much importance is placed on everything that's not your GPA and everything that's not your academic record, because I had a really good one and I still didn't come running out of the gate with a job. And I think what employers like to see, and certainly what anyone else that you're dealing with in the profession likes to see, is that you're a multi-dimensional person, that there's more to you than just reciting contract law and criminal law and whatever area you choose to go into. Since coming into the law, have managed to develop my own passions in travel and wine and eating good food and eating bad food and all those sorts of things. So being able to let myself not be so caught up in studying and having to excel at everything. Not that doing those things is a bad thing or doing those things will harm your job prospects, but that part of what being a good lawyer is being worldly and knowing about society and people and being a part of the world in which you're operating as a lawyer. And you get that from doing things other than being just a good student. I'd say my advice for first-year students or people just starting out in their law studies is a lesson I learned in my very first semester. I failed my first law assignment and then went on to top the graduating program. And how I went from one extreme to the other was that I very quickly realized and figured out that I don't know what I'm doing. I think I understand the content of what they're saying, but law has a very special way of communicating the knowledge that you have. It's not enough to just say, oh, I have the answer to this question, or I know this point of law, or I know what the answer should be. You've actually got to really spell it out, a bit like mathematics. If you get the formula wrong but the answer right, you're only going to get half the marks. And so at the start of your law degree, the first skills that you can really focus on is making sure you know how to write correctly, write the way lawyers write, answer problems the way lawyers answer them, and learn to ask and answer questions and to speak the way lawyers speak. Because these are the fundamental skills that will be transferable no matter what area of law you end up going into. And they're the things that will make or break your law career. The way I know that is, having failed the first assignment in my first semester, I then went on to get 100% in the last assignment of my first semester. So knowing the skills, knowing how to do it, rather than just what you're doing, is key to success in your law studies.
That is fantastic.
There you go.